It's time to stop warping reality and get real about WandaVision. Welcome to the objective review of WandaVision from Disney Plus, delivered by Marvel Studios. And in the objective review, I break a TV show down into 6 categories and assign weights to them depending on the genre to have the most honest, unbiased, objective review as possible. So let's get started with the first category of story.
We are an unusual couple.
The synopsis of WandaVision essentially is Wanda and Vision live a couple's life in these different various kind of states of reality that follows kind of the influence of different TV shows throughout history. And that's all I feel like I can say without spoiling it. There's some good and there's some bad with the story here. So let's start with the good. I think there's a really good underlying story about grief and how you deal with the loss of a loved one, and how if you don't deal with your own grief, it can lead to you bringing other people down as well. Or we're gonna also talk about how you can be in denial of your grief and you're kind of creating these alternate realities yourself. And that's kind of essentially it. I think they ask a lot of great questions about grief and stuff. Granted, I don't think they answer those questions all that well, especially with how the series ends. So you don't get that much credit for dealing with that issue. Also, I think other shows have possibly dealt with that in a much better manner. So on to the bad. If that was good, this is the bad part. There's so much part of the story that after you're done with it, you're like, all right, that part was irrelevant. That was irrelevant. These characters were irrelevant. Like Randall Park's character, I forget his name, the girl from Two Broke Girls, and Monica Rambeau. I love those characters themselves, but they were very irrelevant. And they didn't always seem irrelevant. Like sometimes there'll be whole episodes devoted to them, but by the end of the story, you're like, what the heck was their purpose? If you took them out of the story, it really wouldn't change all that much at all. And there's a couple other characters I won't spoil, but they're irrelevant. And even the main antagonist in this, to me, even he's irrelevant. Really, this show comes down to Wanda and Vision, hence WandaVision. But it just, when you spend so much of the time on other characters, it really slows down the pace of the show, and you end up looking back on it like, why did I even watch most of the show when most of it was irrelevant? Irrelevant. So for story, we're giving it a 7 out of 10. Next is on to emotion.
I think something's wrong here.
Now there were a couple of decent emotional moments in it, especially when you're sitting there with Wanda and she's kind of going through her grief and her pain and her loss. But here's the issue with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Sometimes something that happens in a previous movie or property would have been really good if it happened in the current one, or maybe if they just focus on it maybe a little bit more, because the grief that she's feeling is from 2 movies ago, which at this point, with 2020, it feels like it happened 5 years ago, maybe longer than that. There's just this disconnect between the cause and the effect, and that makes those emotional moments kind of lacking. I will say there's some good writing, a few good nuggets of writing in this that I think really kind of wraps up the emotional beat. There's one good line, I'm sure everyone has seen it. I don't think it's a bad line at all. For some reason, some people are ripping on the line. I think it's a great line about how love is persevering. I love lines like that. Like those lines are really good lines that you can hold on to. Even if you don't like the series, you can hold on to those lines and get a lot out of it. But emotion-wise, it's gonna get 7.5 out of 10. Next is on to action.
This is our home.
Then let's fight for it.
There really isn't that much action in the series, and granted, with superhero TV shows, I'm not expecting all that much action, but this one sets the bar pretty low. Granted, the end there has some really good action scenes. So for action, it's gonna get a 6.5 out of 10. Next is on to comedy.
Well, I think we handled that well.
So this is one of my biggest issues with the show is that I don't care for how comedy was done in old shows. Like the laugh tracks hit so hard, the jokes are cheesy and they're not funny. And when jokes try to be funny and they're not funny, it just worsens that comedy aspect for me. It takes me out of watching the show and being more frustrated that this isn't funny. Like, can we just stop this charade? There are certain characters, like Randall Park's character, I think his name is Agent Lee, who is a comedic character, but he doesn't do anything kind of outlandishly funny. He's just an enjoyable character. Comedy's gonna get a 5.5 out of 10. Next is on to acting.
Well, I assure you, I'm married to a man, a human one.
Elizabeth Olsen does a really great job of carrying this show. She is the main protagonist of this show. She really sells it. She really sells every character, every kind of time frame of TV shows that they're inspired by. Like, she seems like an ageless actress. Granted, I think most actresses could do the same thing. And I also think there were some really good moments of Paul Bettany, some really subtle moments by him that I think was really good. So acting gets an 8.5 out of 10. Next is on to directing.
We just don't know what to expect.
And I feel like this is one of those categories that I'm kind of proving my objectivity in this, because this show does a good job of spanning those different television times, those different old school TV shows. And I hate those old school TV shows. I won't say I hate them, but I highly dislike them. I don't care to sit down and watch them. They're not that good to me. But this show does a really good job of leaning into that. If you like nostalgic TV from that time period, you're gonna love this aspect of this show. But for me, I didn't love that. But just because I don't love something doesn't mean I can't see the great value in it. So directing will get an 8.5 out of 10. That brings the weighted average score to a 7.3 out of 10, which is a good show. I don't think it's the great show that many people are plotting it to be. I think if it wasn't for the red logo that plays in front of it, many people wouldn't care to watch this show. It'd be like one of those kind of indie shows that people say are good, okay, but no one really watches it because no one cares to take a chance on it. And Marvel has earned people's trust. You know, they come out with decent enough movies consistently that people trust that whatever they bring out, whatever they come out with is going to be entertaining enough. And it was entertaining enough for me. I look forward to it. But let me know what you think. If you loved it, that's great. If you didn't love it, that's fine also. All right, sincerely, thank you for watching. I'm out.